October 2008. The leaves in North Canton, Ohio had turned to shades of rust and fire. Families were stringing orange lights, carving pumpkins, and preparing for the rituals of Halloween. It was the kind of suburban neighborhood where safety was assumed, where the changing season meant football games, crisp nights, and nothing more sinister than the chill in the air. But in one home, on a quiet street, horror took root. Not in the form of a campfire story or a midnight movie, but in the most brutal reality imaginable. 34-year-old Brett W. Smith lived there. Brett was a son, a neighbor, a man with his own struggles and his own dreams. Known to those around him as a person with a gentle way and a ready laugh. He wasn't a headline. He was part of the fabric of a community and a presence familiar to those who lived nearby. And yet, in October of 2008, Brett's life was ended in a way that defies reason. He wasn't just murdered, he was decapitated inside his own home. The violence so grotesque that even seasoned investigators struggled to process what they found. The man responsible wasn't a stranger passing through town, wasn't a figure hiding in the shadows. He was a neighbor. William D. Perry, the man who lived just across the fence, the man whose face was familiar on the street. That betrayal of proximity, the evil born from just next door, is what makes this story linger long after the crime itself. When police entered Brett's home, they found not only the evidence of a life stolen, but the evidence of horror carried to its furthest point. Brett's body left behind, his head concealed, a crime not driven by a moment of passion, not a robbery gone wrong, but something darker, harder to comprehend. For the community, the shock was immediate and lasting. Neighbors who had believed they knew the people living beside them were forced to confront a terrifying truth. You can never fully know what happens on the other side of a wall or behind a closed door. And in this case, the man everyone thought was simply another resident had become a monster hiding in plain sight. What makes this case so chilling isn't only the brutality of the murder, it's the way it collapsed the illusion of safety. Brett wasn't out late. He wasn't in a dangerous part of town. He wasn't living a life that should have brought him into contact with that level of violence. He was at home, and yet home became the setting of his last moments. Tonight, we remember Brett W. Smith, not for the horror of how his life ended, but for the man he was before it was stolen. And we examine how a crime this savage, this unthinkable, could unfold in the middle of an ordinary neighborhood at the hands of the man who lived just next door. Because sometimes the scariest stories aren't fiction at all. Sometimes they aren't whispered around campfires or conjured on screen. Sometimes they live across the fence, in the house you pass every day, behind the smile of the neighbor you thought you knew. This is not a movie. This was real. This was the murder of Brett W. Smith. Hey, Angela. How's it going tonight?
Hey, John. It's good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I have absolutely zero complaints.
I'm sure we could find you one up.
Well, I can try to if you want me to. I don't know. But so far, so good.
Good.
Yeah.
Friday?
It is Friday. Yeah.
Somewhere. I'll
Somewhere.
know when you upload this, but it's Friday somewhere.
Yeah, probably will not be when I upload this, but currently it is absolutely Friday. It is. So, are you familiar with this story?
I'm not.
All right.
I've done some good ones for me that I don't know.
Yeah, this is something else. This is quite the story, so I'd be interested to see what you think about it.
All right.
Are you ready to jump in?
I'm ready.
Okay. So, welcome back, listeners, to Dark Dialogue, the podcast where we uncover the crimes that haunt small towns and big cities alike. If you like what we do and how we do it, please give us a like and a follow, share this episode, and leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on. So let's get this started. I'm your host, John.
And I'm Angela. And tonight we're stepping into one of the most disturbing October cases you've likely never heard of. I've never heard of it. A story of betrayal, brutality, and horror that came not from a stranger, but from just across the fence.
That's right. In October of 2008, 34-year-old Brett W. Smith was murdered in North Canton, Ohio. His killer wasn't a faceless intruder. It was his neighbor, William D. Perry. What followed was a crime so grotesque it shocked even the seasoned investigators, not only because Brett's life was taken, but because his body was desecrated in a way that still chills those who remember it. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Every bit of support helps keep these stories alive.
And as we all know, I love October. It's not hidden.
No?
I love decorations. I love the haunted stuff. I don't like haunted houses. I'm gonna argue with that because I will throat punch a person who touches me in a haunted house.
Yeah, well, I'll do that too.
Yeah, because they make you sign those things that you're not going to sue if they touch you, and I turn around and make them sign something that they're not going to sue if I throat punch them for touching.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, the eerie thrill in the air, though, I do love that. However, cases like this one are the reason real life always outshines anything a horror movie can conjure up, because Brett's murder wasn't fiction, and it wasn't fun. It was brutal reality, and it happened in the heart of a neighborhood that thought it was safe.
That's right. This isn't about costumes or campfire stories. This is about the man Brett was, the violence that ended his life, and the unsettling truth that sometimes the scariest monsters don't live in the shadows at all. They live next door. And now, Angela, again, you have some location details for us?
Thanks to you.
Hey, that's all right.
I'm not gonna lie. Thanks to my fearless leader who came through in a clutch, we have some location information. So, North Canton, Ohio, a city that began as New Berlin in 1831, founded by German. Is that going to get old?
What?
Right, 18. Emphasize the 18.
I don't know. You'll have to do a poll and ask the listeners. It doesn't get old to me.
Does it get old? Founded by German settlers looking for farmland and quiet stability. Back then, population numbered just a few hundred. But by mid-1900s, North Canton had transformed into a thriving industrial suburb built around the Hoover Company, the same Hoover that made vacuum cleaners a household name. When the factory was in full swing, this little city symbolized middle-class comfort, kind of place where paychecks came on Fridays and kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. But by the time of Brett W. Smith's murder in 2008, the picture had changed. The Hoover plant had closed its doors the year before, ending more than a century of local manufacturing and sending shockwaves through the community. Population hovered around 16,500, only a modest increase from the 1960s despite decades of suburban sprawl. North Canton had matured, stable, older, quieter. It was a place built on routine, where most people knew their neighbors, and crime was something that happened elsewhere. According to FBI uniform crime reports from that era, violent crime in North Canton averaged fewer than 20 incidents per year, a fraction of the national average. The town's crime rate sat at roughly one-third the state average for Ohio. Property crimes like petty theft or vandalism made up most of the calls to. Murders were nearly non-existent. In fact, between 2000 and 2008, the city recorded 0 homicides.
Wow.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's impressive.
I insane is not a good thing to say, but in this field, that's insane.
Yeah.
It's not something
We don't hear that a lot.
Yeah. That statistical column made what happened in Evergreen Mobile Home Park feel almost surreal, like an earthquake striking flat ground. Evergreen itself sat on the city's fringe, tucked behind rows of maple trees and utility lines, a pocket community where retirees, working-class families, and residents on fixed incomes coexisted in the easy rhythm of small lot living. Most homes were single-wides, chain-link fences, porch lights left burning through the night. Rent averaged just $300 a month, affordable enough for people like Brett Smith, those carving out independence despite financial or health limitations. In 2008, North Canton's police department had a staff of about 25 sworn officers, supported by county detectives for major incidents. The city prided itself in quick response times and low use of force. That infrastructure reflected a sense of trust, belief that this was the kind of town where bad things didn't happen without warning, which is why when a decapitation was discovered inside a trailer home on Balsam Street, even seasoned investigators were stunned. The numbers told one story: safety, stability, normalcy. The reality that October told another. Beneath the familiar rhythm of leaf blowers and high school football games, two neighbors had become enemies. And in a city that hadn't seen a murder in nearly a decade, that single act of violence shattered more than one life. It fractured the illusion of what safe really meant. Today, North Canton still carries that dual identity. The friendly, tree-lined town it has always been, and the place forever marked by one of the most brutal crimes in Stark County history. For a city once defined by clean streets, factory whistles, Brett Smith's murder remains the dark reminder that even in the quietest corners of suburbia, horror doesn't always come from far away. Sometimes it comes from across the fence.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So, Brett William Smith was born on January the 10th, 1974 in Akron, Ohio, to Judy and Ronald Smith. His mother, Judy, worked for Stark County's Mental Retardation Board, which I'm sure that isn't politically correct, a politically correct name now, but while his father, Ronald, was employed by an aerospace company. Brett grew up with a brother and a sister in a close-knit family, but tragedy struck early and hard when his father died in 1994, and then 8 years later, his brother also passed away.
Goodness.
Yeah, this poor woman. These family losses deeply affected Brett and drew him even closer to his remaining family members, especially his mother and his young niece, who became the highlight of his week. From an early age, Brett struggled with severe health challenges. He suffered from epilepsy, which required continual medication and monitoring. He also battled bipolar disorder. These conditions,
Can they catch a break?
No, they cannot catch a break. So these conditions contributed to significant personal and social difficulties, including being bullied and isolated during his high school years. Brett graduated from Lake High School in 1993, where he played percussion in the school band and was remembered by peers as a gentle soul who wouldn't hurt a flea. Despite being picked on for his disabilities, he maintained a polite demeanor and was considered quiet and caring by those who knew him best. After high school, Brett lived with his mother for several years before moving into his own trailer at the Evergreen Mobile Home Park, seeking a greater sense of independence. Employment was a consistent struggle for Brett due to his medical conditions. He relied largely on disability payments for financial support, although he also pursued computer-related side work and even attempted to start a small business from his home. He enjoyed fixing up his trailer, often working on renovations late into the night, and spent much of his free time on hobbies such as music, fishing, gardening, and horseback riding. Technology was a passion for him. He loved working with computers, and he aspired to help others with technical problems. Personal struggles were a reoccurring theme in his life. Living with a speech impediment and facing ongoing mental health issues, he nevertheless clung tightly to his family, especially his niece. His neighbors described Brett as somewhat of a loner, but also as someone who was very friendly once you got to know him. He was not known to drink heavily or use drugs, and although there were rumors of questionable visitors at his home, most verified accounts paint a picture of a man yearning for connection and companionship. As evidenced by his MySpace page, that'll take you back a little bit, where he described himself as a single man looking for Miss Right. Brett's relationship with his neighbors, including William D. Perry, would eventually turn hostile, but he remained close to the longtime residents who frequently saw him around the park or sitting on porches chatting. His strongest emotional connections remained with his family. He loved taking his niece to the park or to McDonald's and frequently spoke to friends and neighbors about his family, reinforcing how important these bonds were to him. And then, despite lifelong battles with his health issues and social isolation and the trauma of multiple family losses, Brett was remembered as hardworking, friendly, and a deeply gentle man, dedicated to his family and to his personal growth. So Brett's journey to home ownership began as a deeply personal quest for independence and stability after years spent living with his mother. His decision to purchase a trailer in the Evergreen Mobile Home Park reflected his desire for both autonomy and a sense of community, an environment where he could have his own space but still remain close to his loved ones. And, his mom was able to come over and check on him and stuff like that because she wasn't far away. After researching available options, Brett settled on a modest trailer situated on lot number 81 along Balsam Street in the small tree-shaded park, nestled beneath the huge canopies of pine, cedar, and hemlock. He was drawn to Evergreen not just by the affordability, but by the possibility of carving out a new chapter in a familiar area, close to his family and the places that he had always known. Neighbors recalled Brett taking great pride in the purchase. He spoke fondly of having finally secured a home to call his very own after years of shared living spaces and transient arrangements. The move-in itself was a gradual process. Brett spent days hauling personal belongings, furniture, and boxes from his mother's home, sometimes relying on her and other family members for transportation. He made repeated trips, carefully arranging everything and always setting aside special sentimental items like family photos and his band percussion accessories and his vast collection of computer equipment, which he considered his lifeline and his hobby. So from the moment Brett stepped inside, he dedicated himself to transitioning the trailer into a comfortable and welcoming environment. The initial state of the home was far from perfect. It was outdated with faded linoleum floors and peeling wallpaper. I don't know if I could say everybody, but I have damn sure been in like this age of a trailer home, and they always need some updating. But this did not deter Brett. Instead, he threw himself into the renovations, working tirelessly day and night. The hum of power tools often echoed late into the evening as he installed new shelving, repainted the rooms in cheerful tones, and meticulously laid new flooring. Brett invested in small upgrades as his budget allowed, often shopping for deals at nearby hardware stores and keeping detailed notes about what still needed to be fixed. Welcoming and eager to share his progress, Brett soon became a familiar presence in the neighborhood. He introduced himself around to all the neighbors, regularly chatting on porches and inviting others to come in and see the improvements he was making. Many recalled that family, especially his young niece, were frequent visitors. Brett delighted in hosting brief play dates, showing off his garden, and sharing simple meals in the newly brightened trailer living room. I mean, he was proud. He was proud of this house he was building, Yeah. And so even as he settled into his new home, he was mindful of the challenges that he faced. His financial constraints, ongoing health issues, and the loneliness of living on his own. Nevertheless, he saw the trailer as a personal sanctuary, a place to heal, to reflect, and nurture a sense of stability after years of uncertainty. Over months, Brett's trailer would come to reflect his personality, creative, hopeful, and focused on building a better life in the face of adversity. His pride in homeownership was matched only by his determination to maintain his independence and the warmth that he offered to those who were close to him. William Douglas Perry was born in Warren, Ohio, on July 14th, 1967, to parents Clayton and Julie Perry. Growing up, William displayed an early penchant for standing out, sporting a mustache as early as his sophomore year at Canton McKinley High School, where he also played football. However, his high school experience was marked by instability, as he did not appear with his graduating class in the 1986 yearbook, hinting at academic or personal turmoil. Shortly after what would have been his graduation, Perry married Laura Succombe in February of 1987 in Niagara Falls. The marriage was brief and it did not produce any children and dissolved 2 years later. Following the divorce, Perry retained little. His property included only a 1984 Chevy Chevette and 2 Rottweiler dogs. Around this turbulent period, Perry was arrested for carrying a concealed weapon, marking the start of a lifelong pattern of criminal activity and legal problems. Professionally, Perry's life was sporadic. He had military service where he served as a Marine and a military police officer during Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, earning distinction for his actions during a riot among prisoners of war. After his honorable discharge in 1991, his life began to unravel due to mounting mental health challenges. Perry was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and bipolar disorder, conditions that would become defining features in his adult life. He worked for periods as a hairdresser, attending cosmetology school, but struggled to maintain any long-term stability. Yeah, and it gets a little weird.
It's a little weird.
We'll get there.
Only a little?
With the hairdresser thing, a bit weird, yes. So, substance abuse further complicated Perry's path. He used alcohol, marijuana, and cocaine. His difficulties culminated in a 1997 prison sentence in Florida for shooting into a bar, establishing a clear trajectory of violence and instability. Returning to Ohio, Perry's life remained erratic, marked by ongoing run-ins with law enforcement. By the time that he moved into the Evergreen Mobile Home Park in North Canton, Perry had developed a reputation among neighbors as angry and volatile. His relationships were often short-lived and tumultuous, and he had ongoing conflicts with residents. Despite the periodic presence of romantic partners, including a girlfriend that he broke up with on the night of the crime, Perry largely lived alone. At the trailer park, he and Brett Smith's trailers were situated end to end, setting the stage for repeated disputes and growing animosity that would ultimately prove fatal. So when Brett Smith first moved into Evergreen Mobile Home Park, his relationship with William D. Perry was, by most accounts, typical of new neighbors. They were polite but distant and marked by occasional casual interaction. They'd talk to each other across the fence or whatever,
Right.
Their trailers were positioned, like I said, end to end. Brett was on Balsam Street. Perry was just behind on Cedar Street. The proximity led them to cross paths frequently, often exchanging quick greetings or small talk, neither overtly friendly or unfriendly, just the typical neighbor relationship.
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? Walk in your house, But for a few weeks, these limited interactions were uneventful and blended into the fabric of park life. At the time, both men were settling into new routines at Evergreen. Brett spent his days working tirelessly to renovate his trailer, often discussing his progress with his family, especially his niece, with neighbors he was beginning to know. And then Perry, meanwhile, was known as a heavy drinker, sometimes spending his days consuming Bud Ice and dipping Copenhagen tobacco. That one I can get behind. Bud Ice, not so much.
I don't even remember, but
I don't either. I think it's in the family of
I remember it being terrible.
Zima.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I never drink any of that shit. It's all gross.
Zima was all good when you put Jolly Ranchers.
Zima was never good.
Okay, it was bearable.
No, it wasn't.
All right.
Anyway, so he chewed.
Convince you.
No, you'll never convince me. So he chewed Copenhagen, but he also would offer to help others with odd jobs around the park. Occasionally, Brett Perry and a nearby neighbor, a guy by the name of Chris Conley, would help each other with small repairs, and their shared efforts lent a sense of temporary camaraderie. However, the differences between Brett and Perry quickly became apparent. Brett was quiet, he was sensitive, and he was a bit of a loner, cherishing his independence and preferring peaceful, solitary activities like remodeling and gardening. Now, Perry, on the other hand, was way more volatile and had a reputation for losing his temper, especially when he was drinking. Neighbors observed that Perry could be unpredictable and sometimes aggressive in conversation, leading others, including Conley, to stay the hell away from him, especially if he was drinking too much. So
trust that Bud Ice.
Now Bud Ice will get you. Bud Ice in Copenhagen. That's a terrible mix, apparently. So, but for the first month or so, their relationship remained on neutral, if not exactly warm terms. Britt was friendly with the Herbs, who were other neighbors, and would often sit on their porch speaking about his family and his new home, while occasionally mentioning Perry and Conley. Perry was spoken about with a mixture of curiosity and caution, giving his imposing demeanor and his habits, but no major conflicts had erupted yet. So as summer turned into August, the friendship started to erode. An as yet unspecified falling out occurred. We don't really know what the hell happened, but it completely changed the dynamic. After that incident, Brett became visibly uncomfortable around Perry. He would avoid any interaction, going inside his trailer if he spotted Perry outside, and he no longer engaged in the occasional group conversations or the project collaborations that had marked their initial, friendship or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, they kind of were getting along, and then something went to shit. Who knows what? My guess is Perry got shit-faced drunk and acted like an ass. And after that, Brett was like, okay, weirdo, I don't want nothing to do with you. So by this point, a sense of unease and avoidance had replaced any semblance of neighborly rapport, signaling that trouble was brewing, though the most serious confrontations, including the incident with the broken electric meter we'll be talking about, and the alleged assault, were still to come. So as summer wore on at the Evergreen Mobile Home Park, the precarious truce between Brett Smith and William Perry collapsed entirely, giving way to a series of escalating confrontations that terrorized Brett and deeply unsettled the neighborhood. So the first major escalation came when Brett alleged that Perry had physically assaulted him. In an incident that marked a clear turning point, Perry reportedly struck Brett in the face. This confrontation rattled Brett, who was already anxious and wary of his neighbor's unpredictable temper. Although Brett reported the assault to authorities, no charges were ultimately filed, and the tensions simmered just below the surface, unaddressed and unresolved. So following this assault, Perry's hostility did not abate. In a more overt act of aggression, Perry was accused of vandalizing Brett's property. Neighbors recalled Brett's distress when he discovered that his electric meter, which is a pretty critical utility for anyone, especially someone like Brett who relied on air conditioning to help regulate his health problems, it had been smashed all to shit.
Your stuff.
Exactly. Yep.
Now you don't cut a tech guy's electricity.
No. So this deliberate destruction of property was a significant escalation, leaving Brett frightened and prompting him to call the police. And as a result, Perry was charged with felony vandalism. The incident prompted law enforcement to visit the park and investigate the property, temporarily raising hopes that external intervention would offer Brett some degree of safety. The atmosphere between the two continued to deteriorate as unfamiliar visitors began frequenting Brett's trailer, sometimes prompting suspicion among neighbors, but also adding to the anxiety of living in a space that felt increasingly unsafe. Friends and neighbors later reported that Brett became even more reclusive, sometimes appearing visibly shaken and expressing outright fear for his safety. He confided in others about Perry's threats and his own sense of helplessness. Rumors and tensions circulated through the park. Perry's drinking escalated, and by some accounts, so did his paranoia and his belligerence. Brett's family and friends became more worried as he continued to voice concerns about being targeted, bullied, or harmed by his neighbor. The cycle of conflict, verbal altercations, police visits, property damage, and persistent fear created an atmosphere of dread that would culminate in tragedy. I mean, it's such a common tale, and it's the same thing you get with like stalkers and everybody. Like, your only recourse for the most part is a restraining order, which does diddly shit.
Yeah.
And so you either abandon your property and run for the hills, or you just live with it and hope for the best. Yeah. I'm talking more with people that can't fight back, because, there's not a lot of stalkers that are coming after me. I'll just beat the piss out of them and call it a day. But, when like stalkers are stalking like a smaller woman or something like that, there's just no recourse.
And sometimes they're stalking you for quite a while before you know it.
Right. And, in a situation like this, I mean, I have more of an aggressive personality than Brett, for sure. Mm-hmm. If somebody smashed in my electric meter, I would probably confront them. It might get physical. I mean, there's a difference, between somebody that's more than willing to take it into their own hands. If the police aren't going to take care of you, I definitely will. And somebody that doesn't feel like they can do that. And the police are their only recourse. And a lot of the times there's no recourse at all because their hands are tied. They can't do shit until a law is broken.
Bad
shit. Yeah, and it's not vandalism. Yeah, they could charge him with vandalism, but, whoop-de shit. It's not until they actually kill you that the police can do anything, and then it's too damn late. Yeah. So, anyway, each step of escalation reinforced the real and present danger that Brett felt, leaving him and those around him caught in the tightening spiral of intimidation and violence that would ultimately end his life. So early in Brett Smith and William Perry's acquaintance, this is the weird part. So before all the shit went down and before they hated each other, there was a particular episode that quickly became local lore among the Evergreen Mobile Home Park residents. Perry, who had attended cosmetology school and had some past experience as a hairdresser, invited Brett over to his trailer for a haircut. At the time, Brett was still new to the park and was making an effort to maintain cordial relationships with his more outgoing, unpredictable neighbor. So accepting the invitation out of politeness, he was not comfortable with this, but he was like, okay. So he accepted it, and he didn't want to offend Perry. So Brett visited Perry's trailer, which Perry had arranged for the occasion. The atmosphere, by all neighborhood accounts, was awkward as hell from the very beginning. Perry treated the moment as an opportunity to showcase his skills, talking adamantly and fussing with his equipment, while Brett, who was shy, was uncomfortable around strangers, and was not accustomed to such attention, just kind of sat quietly and nervously as Perry worked. For Brett, the haircut was far from relaxing. It was far from a neighborly favor. He later relayed the story to fellow residents with self-effacing humor. His discomfort was clear when he was telling the story. The incident stood in sharp contrast to the mounting tensions that would soon follow, representing perhaps Perry's attempt at friendliness that was colored by his overbearing personality and Brett's reluctance to bond. The strange event marked one of Brett's final efforts to keep things civil, but it also revealed decisive cracks in their rapport. In hindsight, neighbors look back at the haircut with unease, recognizing it as both an early warning sign of Perry's weird-ass behavior and the moment that pushed Brett yet further into his social withdrawal and caution around his neighbor. The uneasy peace would soon give way as Perry's behavior grew more volatile and ultimately dangerous. And I just got to say, it's weird. It's freaking weird. Like, if a male neighbor came to me and was like, I really want you to come over so I can cut your hair, I would not I would assume they were hitting on me. I would assume it was a sexual advance.
It sounds like.
Because it's just not something. I mean, it's one thing if your buddy's a barber. Like, my son has a really good friend who's a barber. And so, you know, when that kid comes up, he brings his haircut and stuff, and he'll cut my son's hair. Or if my son goes down there to visit or whatever, he'll cut his hair. That's a totally different thing. They've been friends since, I mean, they went to elementary school together when they were little kids.
Big.
And then a total stranger who's like, come over and let me cut your hair. I mean, I'd feel the same way if it was a female. If a female invited me over to her house to cut my hair, I would assume she was hitting on me. I mean, it's just weird. So that's all I have to say. It's weird.
John's creeped out.
Well, it's kind of creepy, especially considering what's coming. So during the critical period at Evergreen Mobile Home Park, William Perry was involved in a turbulent romantic relationship with Susan Lockard. Lockard was often seen coming and going from Perry's trailer, and her presence was familiar to neighbors who noted the unstable nature of their connection. Their relationship was marked by frequent arguments and stormy reconciliations, a cycle that became particularly pronounced in the days just before Brett's murder. So on the evening of October 3rd, 2008, Lockard arrived at Perry's trailer to pick up laundry, accompanied by her daughter and a friend who was waiting in their car. So Perry emerged from his trailer visibly enraged and in a show of aggression appeared armed as he confronted the car. So despite this freaking weird-ass episode, Lockard, and this woman's crazy I mean, I'm not blaming her, but she's nuts because she chose to stay with this armed lunatic. And so she stayed with him and her companions, her daughter and whoever was in the car, they left. But then later that night, Perry drove Lockard home, and during the drive, he broke up with her. So their relationship was over, dropped her off late in the evening with a finality that punctuated the instability that they had been experiencing. The next morning, Perry picked up Lockard early to take her to work, even despite the breakup.
Right.
Underscoring how entangled and intense and freaking just unhealthy this relationship was. So friends and neighbors observed the tension between Perry and Lockard, noting that arguments seemed to occur more frequently and with greater intensity as the days went by. Lockard sometimes defended Perry in public against rumors about his violent tendencies, insisting that his behavior was misunderstood or exaggerated. However, the ongoing instability and emotional volatility of their relationship were apparent to those in the trailer park for sure.
Yeah.
And many believe that the turbulence in Perry's personal life contributed significantly to his escalating paranoia and erratic behavior leading up to the crime. So on October 3rd, 2008, Brett Smith began his morning quietly at his trailer. He spent time working on the renovations in his home, something that had become a daily ritual and a source of pride, like I said. At some point during the day, Brett made a withdrawal from the bank to collect his monthly disability payment, a routine that he managed carefully to ensure that his bills were paid on time and his basic needs were met. And then throughout the afternoon, Brett called his mother to arrange a visit for supper. He was eager to see his niece, a highlight that he looked forward to every week, and he planned on coming to his mother's house once she returned home from work. The Hansons, who were neighbors living at 65 Spruce Northwest in the mobile home community were undergoing remodeling and briefly interacted with Perry, who tried to requisition an old sink for his own trailer repairs, but it was rebuffed. So this case is showcased on Fear Thy Neighbor. I don't know if you watched it or not.
I have, but this one doesn't sound familiar.
Interestingly, a lot of the shit they get wrong in this show.
Okay.
And this was one of the big things, because in that show, they show Perry trying to get a sink or a door or a toilet or something from Brett, and Brett wouldn't let him have it, and that's why he blew up. But that was not the case. It did happen, but he tried to get it from another neighbor, a sink from another neighbor, and they told him no. And so he got pissed. So meanwhile, William Perry's day was unsettled. His relationship with Susan Lockard was fraught with tension, and Lockard stopped by his trailer in the evening to pick up her laundry, accompanied by her daughter and Chad Long. And this is what we talked about just a minute ago. And Perry was pissed off and armed with a gun. He confronted them outside the trailer, but Lockard, for whatever reason, chose to stay with him, and then he drove her home and broke up with her, dropped her off about 10:30 that night. So throughout the day, the mood in the park was tense. Brett retreated into the safety of his routine and family connections, while Perry bounced from confrontation with neighbors to arguments and emotional turmoil with Lockard. These overlapping interactions, routines, and disputes would form the backdrop for the tragedy that occurred later that night. But until the evening, everyday life continued, marked by uneasy glances, tense exchanges, and a prevailing sense that the peace of the park was wearing thin. So just a quick timeline of the day. Approximately between 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning, Brett withdrew $1,182 in cash from the Lake Community Federal Credit Union in Hartville, and that was his monthly disability check. By late morning or around lunchtime, he met with his mother, Judy, for lunch at Westfield Mall Food Court in Jackson Township. And then after lunch, they went together to Walmart, also in Jackson Township. And at 2:30, Brett and his mother left Walmart in separate cars. Brett mentioned that he would visit his mother's house that evening for supper. At 4:15 that afternoon, Brett called his mother to check what time she would be home so that he could come for supper and to see his niece. At 5:15, William Perry approached the trailer of Barb and James Hansen at 65 Spruce Northwest, asking if he could take a kitchen sink that was left outside during their remodeling. They told him no, and he became very irritated. And then by late afternoon, sometime after 5:15, the Hansons observed Perry standing inside Brett Smith's trailer, and they overheard a very heated argument taking place. So by early evening, Brett never showed up at his mother's home as they'd planned, and calls from his mom to his phone went to his voicemail. And then in the evening, between 10 and 10:30, is when William Perry drove Susan Lockard home, broke up with her, and dropped her off. And then in the late evening, after 10:30, 11 o'clock, Perry went to the home of Dustin Lockard, who was Susan's son, and gave him a pack of Marlboro Light cigarettes, saying, quote, "Keep them because nothing matters anymore anyway," end quote. Yeah, weird.
He knew he was going somewhere.
Yeah. So then the next morning, October the 4th, 2008, his poor mother, Judy Smith, became worried when Brett failed to show up for dinner and didn't answer her calls. Fearing that something was wrong, Judy drove to his trailer and recruited his neighbor, Chris Conley, to help when Brett didn't answer the door. So Conley, at Judy's request, forced the door open with a crowbar. And the first thing he noticed inside was a sticky substance on the floor, reminiscent of spattered paint and or possibly blood.
Right.
The oven in the small kitchen was on, and its door was open with, quote, burnt stuff visible on the rack. And at this point, Conley used a flashlight to look around. The two moved through Brett's trailer. Keep in mind that his mom is with him.
Oh,
it's with Conley. So Conley and Judy moved through Brett's trailer, following the paint-stained hallway to the bathroom, and there on the bathroom floor, they made the grisly discovery. Brett's headless body lay on the floor, wrapped in plastic and partially covered in blue and white paint. A knife was sticking out of his chest. Both hands had been mutilated. All fingers and both thumbs were severed, with one finger and one thumb found on the floor near the base of the bathroom toilet. So obviously freaking panicked. This poor woman called 911.
Yeah.
And when officers arrived, the scene grew even more macabre. Investigating further,
Warning.
yeah, as if we didn't need to give one a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
But investigating further, police found Brett's head inside the still warm oven, partially wrapped in burnt newspaper and cloth. They noted that a strong odor of a bleach-like substance filled the trailer, and attempts had been made to pour or throw paint over evidence throughout the interior of the trailer. So further research revealed Brett's wallet was on the couch, but it was emptied of cash, and a silver bracelet, a detail that would later become important to the investigation, was found on the trailer floor. Outside the trailer, police would eventually find more evidence linking William Perry to the crime. The shock and the horror of the sight left a permanent mark on all involved. I can't even freaking imagine.
Yeah.
Judy's calm but pained 911 call, and it's incredibly impressive that this woman was able to maintain her composure. You can listen to the 911 call. It's available to listen to. She's incredibly composed for having just found her.
Creepily composed, or is she just that type of woman?
She's just that type of woman, you know? I mean, and
I'm not, by the way.
I don't know that I would be in this situation. Finding your son headless. I mean, finding him murdered is one thing, but murdered and mutilated and decapitated.
There would be no understanding me for months.
Yeah. But she was very composed. And I mean, she's buried one child already.
Right.
She buried her husband. Now she just found her other son.
Oh, that's horrible.
I mean, yeah. So, but anyway, that 911 call is out there. So, talking about the condition of the body, and I'm just going to do it because I've already described bad shit. So, I don't know.
We've said trigger.
So Brett's body, like we said, was discovered on the bathroom floor. It was wrapped in plastic and splattered with blue and white paint. He had been decapitated. His head was in the oven. A knife had been left protruding from his chest. His hands were all cut to shit, including his fingers and thumbs cut off. The body in the bathroom showed signs of attempts to clean it up, with a strong odor of bleach all throughout the trailer. And then, like I said, his head was in the oven. The oven in the kitchen was on. The door was open. And then there was sticky substances like blood and blue and white paint. They're smeared all over the hallway, the walls, the bathroom floor. I mean, it's just brutal. I mean, it's just unbelievably insane. So crime scene investigators were called, and then medical examiners documented and then arranged for the removal of Brett's body. Evidence technicians photographed the scene and cataloged items for forensic analysis. Officers canvassed neighbors and other residents for leads and for witness statements. And William Perry was quickly identified as a person of interest, and then a warrant was issued for his arrest by the following day. So some of the evidence that was collected were blood samples and swabs that were taken from the bathroom and from the hallway for DNA analysis. Samples of the blue and white paint were collected for chemical comparisons. The knife from Brett's chest was preserved for fingerprint and trace evidence. The severed digits and all the body parts were cataloged for autopsy and then for forensic evaluation. They took swabs of the bleach, the paint, and the cleaning materials that were documented to show an effort to destroy evidence. The plastic sheeting, the cloth fragments, and the burned newspaper were recovered for fiber and DNA analysis. And investigators lifted fingerprints and possible shoe prints from various surfaces in the house. And then samples from Brett's fingernails and clothing were taken to identify possible foreign DNA. So during the initial phases of the investigation, before any arrests were made, police and crime scene specialists worked intensively to unravel the circumstances of his murder. Upon arrival, detectives and patrol officers secured the entire trailer park, the whole damn thing, establishing a perimeter to keep residents and onlookers away from the crime scene. Only investigators, forensic technicians, and the coroner's team were allowed inside the trailer, obviously. Police meticulously processed the home, beginning with a photographic record of every room and every piece of disturbed evidence. I know these poor cops, too, man. They have to, I mean, you know, you get called, you see some shit nobody should ever have to see. And this is one of those calls. So as they canvassed the neighborhood, all the neighbors were like, you need to talk to freaking William Perry. He's kind of a loose cannon. There've been disagreements between these two and blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, he was on their radar pretty early. And, you know, then they also reviewed the park's visitor log. They called nearby businesses to see if they had surveillance recordings, and they checked if any outside cameras caught Perry entering or leaving the scene. And at the same time, Brett's financial activity, such as the recent cash withdrawal, were checked for any irregularities or for possible connections. And throughout these efforts, police kept Brett's family updated, working with victim support resources while awaiting forensic analysis and autopsy results. And I mean, they did a very good job in that area, as well as I could tell, communicating as much as they could with his poor mom while maintaining everything they needed for prosecution of this freaking psychopath. So now we got to talk about the autopsy. I should have just given a trigger warning at the beginning of this episode, because the whole damn thing's bad.
All October episodes.
Yes. So the autopsy was performed within hours of his body's discovery and began with a painstaking external and internal examination designed to clarify the cause and manner of death, as well as to gather any forensic evidence. So externally, the medical examiner documented signs of violent trauma, obviously. The most immediately apparent injury was the decapitation. Brett's head had been severed from the body with a sharp instrument, the cutting edge leaving ragged tissue and nicked vertebrae at his neck. Careful examination revealed hesitation wounds, suggesting interrupted or repeated attempts before he completely severed the head. His body and wounds were heavily contaminated with blue and white latex house paint, obscuring some injuries and complicating the examination. The torso bore further evidence of violence. Embedded directly into his chest was a kitchen knife, plunged between the ribs and penetrating the left lung. There were multiple sharp force injuries on the chest, shoulders, and arms, defensive wounds consistent with an attempt to fend off an attack. Both hands were mutilated after death. All fingers and thumbs had been cut off with a sharp tool, with the stumps showing clean, post-mortem edges and minimal bleeding. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why you cut somebody's fingers off and then leave them.
Yeah.
You know, like I've heard of people cutting fingers off and the head off and taking it somewhere else so that the body can't be identified
as quickly. Yeah.
But first of all, it's in his house. Chances are it's him. It's not going to be that hard to freaking identify the guy. And then two, you leave the head in the oven and the fingers scattered all over the floor. Like, what is the point of any of this? It is. It's so freaking just that. So the fingertips and the thumbs recovered from the scene were likewise examined. No defensive wounds were present on the digits, supporting the conclusion that the mutilation was carried out after Brett's death. likely to hamper identification or some weird ritualistic thing. Like, I can't come up with shit on this.
One finger in the thumb, or rest of the thumb?
No, they found all of them. They were all there.
Did I hear you say that and just glossed over it?
I think I mentioned that they found like 2 of them near the baseboard in the bathroom.
Yeah. Okay.
But they found them all. So then they did toxicology analysis, and no evidence of any alcohol, sedatives, or narcotics were found in Brett's system. The head was found, like I said, in the oven. It was severely burned on one side and partially wrapped in scorched cloth and newspaper. The examiner documented thermal injuries to the facial and the scalp tissues.
I didn't understand that. Was he trying to get us to catch fire, maybe?
I don't have a clue what in the hell this lunatic was doing. I mean, I can't come up with shit on this. I seriously can't.
It's more so asking for your opinion, not based on past
but I mean,
experience.
I can't even come up with a good opinion. I think he was an absolute lunatic. That's all I can come up with because nothing else makes sense.
Right.
It would make sense that you might burn a head to obscure the identity, but
I mean, newspaper in the oven, that hoping it catches fire is what I'm assuming.
Maybe.
Right.
Why not crank it up to broil and close the door? Why leave the door open? It's just bizarre. I don't think you can logically come up with it. It's like I've said a million times, the sane cannot understand the insane, and this son of a bitch is out of his mind.
True.
Period.
Very.
So the jaw and the dental structures were intact, allowing for positive identification, but the scalp showed additional sharp force injuries that likely caused pain and disfigurement, but were not fatal, and they occurred obviously before the decapitation. The internal examination confirmed the fatal injuries, massive hemorrhage from decapitation, and the puncture to the lung would have led to a rapid loss of consciousness and death. He was likely alive when they started to cut his head off.
But hopefully passed out.
Hopefully. The tracheal and spinal cord section showed blunt force trauma around the neck, consistent with a struggle or restraint just before the fatal wounds were inflicted. There was no evidence of sexual assault or pre-existing disease that were found. The paint, cleaning chemicals, and bleach residues were present on the skin, hair, and in some of the wounds, indicating, I guess, attempts to obscure evidence or destroy forensic markers, or just a lunatic on the loose. I don't know.
All of the above.
And then finally, the combined cause of death was determined as, quote, homicidal violence due to multiple sharp force injuries, decapitation, and chest stabbing, end quote, with extensive postmortem mutilation. The medical examiner's office report meticulously cataloged all the wounds and evidence, establishing a clear and grisly sequence of events, and provided investigators with the vital forensic details to corroborate what they found at the crime scene, and then would later support the criminal prosecution. So Perry became the prime suspect almost immediately.
Right.
You know, he had a history of conflict. The neighbors and the residents there all said, this guy is a loose freaking cannon. They've had a disagreement with each other. They've been fighting, you know, and cops certainly had a record of the calls that Brett had made, the vandalized electric meter, the assault, all the shit that had happened between them. So it was pretty easy to start looking his direction. And then on the day before and the day of the murder, Perry's conduct was erratic and confrontational. We talked about it. He was observed in all kinds of heated exchanges. He seemed visibly upset after this dispute with his girlfriend. And then he had the fight with the freaking neighbors that wouldn't give him the sink. So, you know, he's a loose cannon, like I said. And then Perry's trailer was searched soon after Brett's body was found, and investigators noticed signs that he had hurriedly packed some of his belongings and took off. Items like cleaning chemicals, a crowbar, and clothing with possible blood or paint stains were missing. They didn't find this shit. Forensic teams matched the shoe prints in Brett's trailer to a pair of commonly worn shoes that Perry had, and several witnesses stated that they saw Perry entering and or leaving Brett's trailer around the estimated time of the homicide. And then Perry's ex-girlfriend and others explained that his mood had drastically deteriorated in the hours before the murder. He had made ominous statements, including handing over personal items and remarking that, like I said, none of this matters anymore. Why a pack of cigarettes? I don't freaking know. I mean, back in the early 2000s, I think that was before they all shot through the roof on price. I think a pack of cigarettes back then was like $3 or something like that. So they're like $11 or $12 a pack.
A pack?
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. It's insane. I don't know how people smoke.
Dang.
So, and then the final clinching factor was his sudden and unexpected disappearance and flight. When police arrived at his trailer after the discovery of the body, he was gone. He flew the coop. And that's a pretty good indication that he has some consciousness of guilt. So, obviously, they started a manhunt looking for this freaking psychopath. Uniformed officers scoured the neighborhood on foot and by car, questioning all the residents in the park, talking to local businesses, just everybody around there, seeing if anybody had seen this lunatic. And then they put out media alerts and published his photo, his name, his vehicle description, asking for, tips to find this psychopath. And then Temps prompted officers to check gas stations, bus stations, and airports for activity matching Perry's description. Surveillance videos from nearby businesses were reviewed for leads. Some witnesses recalled seeing Perry leaving the area in a hurry, while others reported conversations with him that hinted that he might try to leave town or maybe even kill himself. So as hours passed without his apprehension, the search expanded, and state law enforcement as well as federal agencies were notified in case he tried to cross state lines. And throughout this period, the local community was obviously freaking on edge. I would be freaked out. I'd probably get a motel and move the hell out of my trailer for a little bit, especially if I'd had an argument with this psychopath. So his arrest was the dramatic culmination of the extensive multi-day manhunt that spanned the local neighborhoods, surrounding counties, statewide searching. Investigators quickly traced Perry's movements through tips from neighbors, through surveillance footage, all of their investigation, and it became clear that he fled the trailer park on the night of the murder. And witnesses saw him driving erratically away in his car, and some reported that he appeared agitated, maybe intoxicated. And so law enforcement disseminated his photograph all over the place. And the breakthrough came when Perry was spotted at a relative's house in a nearby county late in the afternoon, about 3 days after the murder. He had arrived suddenly, appearing disheveled, exhausted, and showing signs of psychological distress. The relative, aware of the seriousness of the case due to the widespread coverage and the police warnings, quietly contacted the authorities. Kudos on you, relative. I don't want this son of a bitch sleeping in my house. So uniformed officers and detectives converged on the property with caution, and they established a perimeter. They contacted Perry through the relative, requesting that he exit the home peacefully, and he complied with their initial negotiations, emerged from the house with visible anxiety, but without any resistance, and he was immediately apprehended and searched for weapons and all that good stuff that happens upon arrest. So once he was arrested, his clothing, shoes, and personal items were bagged and preserved for forensic analysis. Officers noted traces of blue and white paint on his clothes and on his hands. His car, which was parked nearby, was searched for cleaning chemicals, personal effects, and any incriminating evidence. And at police headquarters, he was placed under observation and question, and he displayed signs of emotional disturbance and fluctuated between periods of agitation, resignation, and absolute incoherence. Throughout the initial interrogations, he provided conflicting stories, sometimes referencing the events at Evergreen Mobile Home Park and making ambiguous statements about whether he was guilty or whether he was innocent. So, the police notified the community they'd arrested the psychopath. I'm sure everybody breathed a huge sigh of relief because the freaking psychopath was in jail. I'm sure that all the neighbors in the trailer park knew exactly who'd killed Brett.
Yeah.
I think the police pretty quickly knew exactly who'd killed him.
Yeah.
So once the son of a bitch was arrested, it had to be a huge sigh of relief because it's not like, is he really the guy or he's the guy? He's the freaking guy. He's the creepy haircutter dude. So yeah, that's him. So then his trial became a focal point of the public's attention in North Canton and all over the place. So before the trial, both the prosecution and the defense engaged in extensive pretrial maneuvering. They always do. The defense attempted to argue that Perry was mentally unstable. They were seeking a psychiatric evaluation to establish a diminished capacity or an insanity defense. The prosecution countered with evidence of Perry's calculated actions before and after the murder. Just for reference, if you run from the scene of the crime, you're going to have a really hard time arguing insanity. Yeah. Because that is consciousness of guilt. That shows that you knew it was wrong. You did it anyway. So, yeah. So
been at your house, playing house like normal.
Yeah, and the cops come and you're covered head to toe in blood. You're like, hey guys, want to come play him a game?
Yeah. Do you need a haircut?
Yeah, you need a haircut. Exactly. So jury selection was a painstaking process due to the case's notoriety. Prospective jurors were questioned individually about their opinions on violent crime, media exposure, mental health defenses, all of the things. But eventually a jury was chosen that was capable of examining the disturbing evidence impartially. And I gotta say, man, hats off to these jurors, too. To have to view this shit. I mean, nobody wants to see this. Nobody wants to see any part of this. No sane person anyway. So at trial, the prosecution meticulously reconstructed the events that led up to the murder. They presented witness testimony that detailed the hostile relationship, the prior violence between Perry and Brett, the escalating threats and the physical altercations in the weeks before the murder, and the sightings of Perry entering and leaving Brett's trailer around the estimated time of death. And then they called in the forensic experts who talked about the blood, the blue and the white paint, the chemical traces that were found on Perry's clothing and on his other personal effects. They talked about the matching shoe prints at the crime scene that corresponded to Perry's footwear. And they talked about the DNA evidence that linked Perry to the murder weapon, to the plastic wrappings, and to multiple items that were found in Brett's trailer. And then medical examiners testified in graphic detail about the autopsy, all the shit that we already talked about. I ain't going to go through it again. It's just macabre and nasty. And yeah. So the prosecution unveiled Perry's own statements, which were obtained after arrest, in which he alternately admitted involvement and then claimed not to remember critical details. They called witnesses, including neighbors and Brett's family, who painted Perry as a volatile, controlling psychopath, an absolute lunatic. The defense's primary argument centered around his mental health history, specifically his diagnosis of bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder, and that he got supposedly from his prior military service, his troubled life. The defense conceded Perry's presence at the scene and interaction with Brett, but attempted to cast doubt on his intent, suggesting a sudden breakdown triggered by some kind of psychological distress rather than coldly executing the murder. The trial was marked by emotional outbursts, especially during testimony from Brett's mother, who described discovering her son's body in graphic detail. Family members of both Brett and Perry attended every session, sometimes requiring special security arrangements and counseling support. No shit.
Yeah.
The courtroom was often filled beyond capacity, and local media reported almost daily on the dramatic moments, keeping the public awareness and tension high throughout the proceedings. Both sides delivered passionate closing arguments. The prosecution reiterated Perry's methodical violence, the overwhelming forensic evidence, and the pain inflicted not just on Brett, but also on his mother and on the community in general. The defense pleaded for leniency.
Need therapy too.
Shit, yeah, they need therapy. I mean, the one guy that doesn't get anything is the neighbor Conley that broke into the trailer and went in with his mom. He saw shit nobody wants to see too, man.
Something.
I mean, he's probably still having nightmares about this shit. So the defense pleaded for leniency, warning against judging Perry solely by his worst moment. Well, when you murder somebody, that's what we judge you on.
Exactly.
Period.
Yeah. Oh, but yeah.
And then obviously they talked about his mental health struggles. And I mean, there's so many people that deal with bipolar disorder that don't decapitate their freaking neighbors.
Exactly.
I don't even want to hear this shit, man. So yeah, do something. But bipolar disorder does not lead you to decapitate neighbors, even if you're not taking your meds. It's not like, I mean, you know, like schizophrenia, if you're not being treated, it can lead to really, really bad things. Bipolar disorder typically is not violent. And if it is, you usually hurt yourself, especially when you're in the depressive phases of it. Right. I mean, I've known all kinds of people that struggle with bipolar disorder. I've never known any of them to be violent because of that. Some of them are violent. Yeah. Some of them are violent people just in general, but it's not caused from that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. And then, yeah, I don't know. So anyway, jury deliberations lasted 2 days. The community waited obviously anxiously as the panel examined the mountain of evidence. Ultimately, the jury found this piece of shit guilty of aggravated murder with special circumstances related to the decapitation. We'll be frank. I mean, it was related to the brutality and the premeditation of the act, but it was the decapitation. So during the sentencing phase, the court heard additional testimony from the Smith family about the impact that the crime had on them. Perry's defense reiterated his psychological state and expressed remorse after asking for a sentence less than the death penalty. So at this point, the guy is guilty. Now they're just trying to keep him out of the chair or whatever they use in Ohio. The judge, following the state guidelines and weighing the crime's severity and the community's need for justice, sentenced Perry to life in prison without parole. The sentence reflected both the overwhelming evidence and the public's absolute revulsion at the crime. So obviously the trial concluded, it gave, it's hard to even say this, but some sense of closure, I guess, for the family. I don't know if you can really call it closure. I don't know what the hell you call it.
Or.
So following sentencing, he attempted to file a delayed direct appeal and later pursued post-conviction relief, raising concerns about his representation. I'm sure it was ineffectiveness of counsel. It's always ineffectiveness of counsel. And the circumstances that led him to he ended up accepting some kind of a negotiated plea deal where he ended up pleading guilty to 2 counts of aggravated murder with the death penalty specifications. And so he waived his right to any appeals. And so the appellate courts reviewed his filings but found that he was represented both by death penalty qualified attorneys, and he had been fully briefed on the nature and the impact of all of this, and he knowingly entered into an agreement before a judicial panel. So the courts upheld the conviction and denied Perry's request, ruling there was no evidence of improper coercion or any constitutional errors. No further successful appeals. Nothing has happened. I mean, he can go to hell. He can rot in prison. He can die there. He's a psychotic son of a bitch. We definitely don't want him out on the street. Obviously, that's had significant impact on Brett's family. His poor mother had already endured the unimaginable by burying her husband, burying one son, and now she has to bury another son. I mean, I just cannot imagine. And then obviously the way that he was murdered and everything had to make it just so much worse. You know, it's never, ever, ever easy for a parent to bury their child or anything like that. But to find them in that, first of all, to be the one that finds them.
Yeah.
Second of all, to be the one that finds them decapitated and mutilated. I mean, it just doesn't get any worse.
Sorry, I was looking at his eyes.
Oh,
It's
Perry's?
yeah.
Yeah. You want to get a haircut?
He doesn't have any now.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't. I saw him. He had hair when he went to court, but
Yeah. This is
yeah.
yeah. But this is where is he now? And the only hair he's got is a beard.
Yep. Well, he's a freaking psychopath.
Eyes are creepy as shit. I don't know why I felt the need to torture myself like that.
Yeah, he's a freaking psycho. So Brett William Smith's life was marked by both struggle and resilience. He faced epilepsy, bipolar disorder, and the isolation that often comes with being different. Yet through it all, he held tight to the things that gave him joy: music, gardening, computers, and above all, the family that he loved. His mother, his sister, and his young niece were his anchor. He wasn't a headline or a case file. He was a man who wanted what we all want: a sense of stability, independence, and belonging. In October 2008, all of that was taken from him in a way so violent, so grotesque, that even seasoned investigators struggled to process the scene that they found. Brett wasn't simply murdered. He was mutilated, desecrated, and robbed of dignity by the man who lived just across the fence. A neighbor, someone whose face was familiar, whose presence was ordinary. And that is what makes this story so chilling. Brett wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time. He wasn't wandering the streets late at night or living a life that drew danger to him. He was at home, in the place that should have been his sanctuary. And still, the danger came, not from the shadows, but from next door. For Brett's family, the loss was devastating. His poor mother, Judy, had already endured more than her share of grief. To discover her son in that state after years of caring for him, supporting him, and watching him fight for independence was an agony that no parent should ever know. For his sister and his niece, the absence is permanent, felt in every holiday, every birthday, every empty chair at the table. For the community of North Canton, the illusion of safety collapsed. The ideal that neighbors could be trusted, that home was a place of refuge, was torn apart by a crime that seemed ripped from the pages of horror fiction. But it was all too real. And yet Brett must be remembered for more than the brutality of his death. He should be remembered for the man that he was: gentle, caring, hopeful, even in the face of hardship. His life was worth more than the violence that ended it. His name deserves to be spoken not only as part of a crime, but as part of a family's love and a community's memory. This was not a Halloween story. It was not a film, not a piece of fiction. It was the real and tragic end of a life that mattered. Brett William Smith deserved so much more. Brett Smith was born June 10, 1974 in Akron, Ohio, to Ronald and Judy Smith. From his earliest years, Brett was marked by both challenges and a deep reservoir of resilience. He lived with epilepsy and bipolar disorder, conditions that demanded constant care, but never stripped away his gentleness or his ability to love. Those who knew Brett remember his kindness first. He was quiet, soft-spoken, and unfailingly polite. He wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but he had a warmth that made people comfortable once they got to know him. His mother, Judy, described him as gentle, a son who, despite struggles, always cared for the people around him. Music was one of Brett's earliest passions. At Lake High School, he played percussion in the band, finding expression and pride in rhythm. He also had a love for computers and technology, often tinkering with machines and dreaming of ways to build something more out of that interest. Gardening brought him peace, and he found joy in tending to the plants, creating life where there had once been none. Fishing and horseback riding were favorite pastimes, reminders of his love for the outdoors and the simple calm that it offered him. In 1993, Brett graduated from Lake High School. He carried with him both the scars of being bullied for his differences and the pride of having endured, of having fought through difficulties and moved forward anyway. As an adult, Brett continued to strive for independence. He moved into Evergreen Mobile Home Park, where he worked tirelessly to turn his trailer into a true home. He painted, repaired, and renovated, shaping it into something that reflected not just shelter, but determination. His home was his project, his pride, his place of belonging. Above all, Brett loved his family. His relationship with his mother, Judy, was one of closeness and devotion. She had been his advocate, his support system, and his constant companion. His sister and his niece were also central in his world. He doted on his niece, often taking her to McDonald's or to the park, finding joy in the simplest moments of play and laughter. Those little outings, ordinary to some, were extraordinary to him, and they were moments his niece would never forget. But tragedy seemed to follow the Smith family. In 1994, Brett's father Ronald died. In 2002, his brother Ronald Jr. passed away. And in 2008, Brett himself was brutally murdered. For Judy, who had already endured the loss of her husband and one son, losing Brett in such a violent and senseless way was an agony that words cannot contain. To bury a husband is devastating. To bury one child is unimaginable. To bury two sons is a grief beyond measure. Judy bore that weight with a strength no parent should be forced to summon. When asked about Brett, Judy said that she would always remember her son's laughter, his kindness, and the way that he never gave up when life seemed impossibly hard. Quote, "He had a good heart," she said. The heart, often overlooked by the world, sometimes misunderstood because of his conditions, was the core of who Brett was. Neighbors and friends described Brett as quiet but friendly, someone who preferred peace to conflict. He didn't seek out trouble. He simply wanted to live his life, to build his home, to spend time with his family, and to carve out his place in the world. It is easy, in the retelling of a crime, for victims to become overshadowed by the brutality of their deaths. But Brett must be remembered for his life, for the way he loved his mother, for the bond he had with his niece, for the simple joy of drumming in high school, of fishing on a calm day, of planting something and watching it grow, for the resilience of a man who faced hardships many never will, and still carried kindness at his core. And Judy must also be remembered, not only as a grieving mother, but as a woman who endured loss upon loss and still stood with courage. To survive the death of a husband and then two sons is an almost unimaginable burden. But Judy carried that grief with dignity, continuing to speak Brett's name, to share his story, and to make sure that he would never be forgotten. Tonight, as we honor Brett's memory, we do so by remembering the man that he was, not the way his life was taken. He was a son, a brother, an uncle, and a friend. His life had meaning. His story deserves to be told, and his memory deserves to be carried forward, not as a victim alone, but as a gentle soul who wanted only peace and family. Brett William Smith deserved more years, more laughter, more moments of joy, and Judy deserved far less sorrow. Together, their story is one of love, loss, resilience, and memory. And tonight, we keep that memory alive. That's where we close the story of Brett William Smith, a man who lived with challenges, who still carved out a life of independence, who loved his family deeply, and who deserved far more than the horror that ended his life. Brett should be remembered for his kindness, his resilience, and his devotion to those that he loved, not for the cruelty inflicted upon him.
And his mother, Judy, the strength she carried after burying a husband and 2 sons is almost beyond belief. Her story is one of unimaginable loss, but also of love that endures even through grief. Tonight we honor not just Brett, but there is his memory.
So before we close this out, what are your thoughts on this freaking crazy-ass story?
I'm heartbroken.
I mean, it is just tragic, isn't it?
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
There is no word strong enough. Disgusting.
I agree, 100%. So
noises.
Yeah, that's yep. So if you believe in the work that we're doing, if you want to help us keep these stories alive, there are so many ways that you can join us. Become part of the Dark Dialogue Collective, or take part in the Adoptive Victim Program, where you can choose to carry forward the legacy of someone who can no longer speak for themselves.
And you'll find all of that at darkdialogue.com. That's also where you can read our victim tributes, explore our case files, and find ways to be part of this.
You can also email us directly at info@darkdialogue.com. Whether it's tips, research, or your own reflections, we read everything and we value every message that we receive.
Don't forget to subscribe to our Substack, where we post extended case notes, behind-the-scenes research, and updates on episodes. It's another way to get deeper into these stories and stay connected.
More than anything, your support matters. Whether it's subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing this episode with someone else, each action helps us honor victims like Brett and keep these dialogues alive.
So, as we close tonight, remember Brett. Remember his life, not just the way it ended.
Keep searching, keep questioning, keep remembering, keep listening, and above all, keep the dialogue alive.